Hi, I'm Rob, and if you've been on this channel before, you may have known there were quite a lot of mental health videos on here. Um, Unfortunately, I decided to take them down, and that was during a period where I just wasn't very well, and I just wasn't happy with them. I think because I felt like I couldn't even take my own advice. So I watched them back, and I'm like, who even is that? Um, But saying that has given me the opportunity to start again. And plus, a lot has changed. I mean, a lot has changed since those videos, and my perspectives will be different on the subjects. And maybe I can make these videos a bit more personal because I think that it might help me in some way. I don't know. Uh, I guess this video is just talking about like mental health in general and how it affects so many people, especially during this time with the COVID-19 virus and things like that. A lot of people are stuck in the house. A lot of people are on their own, they've got no one to talk to. And I think talking through video and things like that is not quite the same as being with someone physically because you're kind of restricted to this sort of area of who you are. I mean, sure you could pan out the camera, but it's just not the same. Um, Now, I've just come off from having a week off work, and admittedly, it was quite difficult. It's been difficult being kind of like stuck in. It doesn't matter what you're. I find like I've got loads of indoor hobbies I like to mess about with. I like video games. I've got Lego. I've got movies I need to catch up with. I've got TV series. I've started to get into kind of arty things at the moment, but they're all very like on your own type things. And don't get me wrong, I would always say I'm an introvert. Oh, my camera's sliding slowly down. Um, but I would also say you need people, regardless of whether you're introverted or not. Um, and I've definitely felt it this week more than ever that how difficult it's kind of been without interacting with people I normally see, essentially. Uh, I think a lot of people with mental health issues can definitely relate to the fact that when you're on your own, you can kind of be your worst enemy or your best friend, sort of thing, because you're on your own, you're in your own head. It doesn't matter what distractions you've got, because sometimes my brain's like, "Oh, you've done enough of this today. Go do something else." Um, don't do too much of this. And to be fair, I agree with that. I agree. Sorry, this is too much. Okay, phone. Would you like to sit up a little bit more? Okay, we're just gonna stick something behind this to there we go. Beautiful. So, yeah, too much of a good thing is a bad thing. Do you know what I mean? Like I could sit here all from I could wake up in the morning and play video games until I go to bed, but I'm not gonna do that. I used to do that sort of stuff when I was a kid, but that's another subject. So I already know it's not healthy to do. But you can say about anything, say no one would say go outside and exercise all day, from crack of dawn to nighttime. You got to have a rest. You got to mix it up. You got to do something different. You've got to make your day a bit varied. I mean, sure, you could have a day where you have to work on something or you want to do this one thing that day. That's all you've had planned. But when you've got a whole week to sort of do things, which you can't really do much outside your own home, it can be difficult. Like I've gone for a few walks, and I've enjoyed those walks. It's great to get out in the fresh air. It really is. Even on my own, I just put some music on and I go walk around an area I know well because I know I live in the Isle of Man, by the way, which is in the middle of the Irish Sea, which is in the middle of the UK. And I've lived here all my life, and I know I've grown up in a town called Onken, which I know like the back of my hand. So I just walk in the areas which I like. It's kind of it's a good and a bad thing because I have a lot of good memories and a lot of bad memories. So, you know, but I tend to, depending on how I feel, I don't think about that bad stuff. And I think you could say that about depending on where your mind is. Sometimes we if we're not in a good place, we just tend to drag up all the past and think about everything that's happened and go just relive it in your mind. But when you're in a good place, and even if you go to a place where something bad has happened, because you're feeling so good, it doesn't, or it might spark off what happened there. But then you just think, I don't care. I feel too good to even think about this thing. So yeah, as I say, good and bad thing. But yeah, getting out and about and walking about, I enjoy it. Obviously, during this time, it's difficult because there are people also trying to get some exercise, and you have to be very careful because you don't want to get, you don't want to get too close to them. You don't want to upset them, and completely understandable. Um, but yeah, the weather's been really good this week, which helps a lot. Even if it was bad, I would have got out because just getting out in that air. Um, I don't go out at much at night during the evening. I used to when I was much younger, and I have been doing this week, and I'm like, wow, I miss the night smell. If that makes sense, like there are smells that are different from the daytime, and just the nighttime walking could be nice. In the Isle of Man, it's very safe. It has got crime, but it's. Thankfully, we're very lucky that we don't have a lot of it. So walking about at night, but then again, when I say night, I'm like walking out at like 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the evening. Um, and it's just nice. It's just nice and peaceful. I go to some of the areas where I go to during the day, and it gives like a totally different atmosphere. And you can't like I like to take pictures when I'm out, but you can't really get that many pictures during the nighttime unless you're in a well lit area. And some of the places I go aren't actually well lit, which is surprising because some of these are public walkways, and you think shouldn't they be well lit? But never mind. But yeah, this whole like atmosphere at nighttime is so different. It's just completely different. Which someone could say, well, duh, obviously. Yeah, well, it's been a while since I've been out during the night time. But I found it very, very helpful, getting out and about. But again, you can't interact with really much people at the moment, and it can be a bit of a struggle. But I'm not going to use that. That is not the idea behind the video. Is to say, okay, this video is about dealing with COVID, because it's not. That's just a side thing, and maybe I went on for that a bit too longer. But anyway, on a regular, when things were not like this and things were normal, you could do what you want. It doesn't matter what the situation is. Your mental health doesn't pick and choose when it wants to bother you. It just happens. It's like your physical health. Sometimes you have physical ailments which just happen for no reason, unfortunately. Mental health, it's difficult. To go into it to say, well, what's the reason behind it all? That's too big of a question. To sort of summarize it into a more smaller, condensed, simplified version is like you've got people say you've got chemical imbalances, you've got experiences that happen in your life that are traumatizing, the way that you think about yourself. Do you like the way you talk to yourself, the way people have talked to you. There's a lot. There's a lot there to unpack, and mental health in general is very difficult to deal with because it's not like physical health that if you've got a broken leg, you've got to put a cast on that leg. But if if your mind is not well, there might be a lot of reasons behind that, and that's why we have things like therapy and psychologists and psychiatry, and you have like antidepressants, anti-anxiety. You have therapy dealing with different things like PTSD, eating disorders, trauma, things like that. There's lots and lots and lots of things there. But my own experiences have led to like some bad dark times, and more recently than ever. But it kind of led to a thing which is I guess I want to get into more, is a thing which kind of like I knew about this thing a few years ago, and I was kind of like, that sounds like me. That's me. That's what's going on in my life. That's behind everything. It isn't the answer to everything, but it certainly explains a lot in my life. And basically last year, I was diagnosed with autism, being on the autistic spectrum. And I kind of knew I was I was on the autistic spectrum probably back in, I think it was 2017, and that was when I was doing therapy, and we just had like it's like a light bulb moment where therapist said to me, "Oh, you don't know when people like you," and you're kind of like, "Well, that's what do you mean?" And I was trying to explain to her about somebody who was doing my head in because they kept asking me about this one thing. And I was like, "Why are they always asking me about this thing? Why are they always annoying me?" I say, "I don't like this thing," and they're like, "Maybe they want to be friends with you," and I'm kind of like, "Oh, I didn't think of it that way." And I remember going home and being like googling like why why can't I tell if someone likes me? And then it just went it just kind of like I went into like the rabbit hole where I found about what autism was and like what is this? And I was like reading it. I was like, oh my god, this is like me. This is me. But it kind of went. It didn't go the way you expect it to go. I'm not going to go into that right now. So it's like, wait, why did it take so long for you to get diagnosed? Well, that's a long story, and that's probably for another video, but not right now. So, before I was diagnosed with autism, which was only last year, I had things like depression. I was dealing with eating disorders. I was dealing with a lot of other things, which saying off the top of my head is a bit hard to think about. And at the moment, there's a lot going on in my life, which is kind of like difficult to deal with. And I've been having these like emotional outbursts, which come on all of a sudden. And I don't want to get into something too deep in case I'm like, oh god, I'm going to start crying in front of this camera, which I don't really want to do right now. Maybe never. Um, but you know, at the moment, I've been doing quite good, like really good. And I think a big change has come over me because of certain things which have happened and the sort of way I'm looking at life now. Um, I kind of want to go into it, but I don't because I just want this video to be relatively short, like not too big. Um, all I can say is if you are dealing with mental health issues at the moment, like I've been talking to some people who are just beginning this, like, you know how they call it, like the mental health journey, and some people might say, "Oh, it sounds so corny. It doesn't sound good. It doesn't. It sounds actually like a good thing." It's like no, it isn't corny. It's true. Like someone will say to me, "Oh, I feel a little bit like I've been depressed a few times, or I'm anxious a few times," and you, from someone who's been there many times, you're kind of like, "Oh boy, this could go either way." This because the thing about mental health is it's not like you go to the doctor and go, "I've been feeling anxiety," and most of the time, if you go to your GP, they will just give you they'll probably give you medication for it. They won't say to you, well, why? Well, they might ask you, no, sorry, they might ask you what's going on in your life, and you'll say, well, work's a bit tough at the moment, or people will say, well, this COVID thing, or you're the one telling them what you think your anxiety might be behind. They can't tell you. They're just saying, well, that might be it. You might need to do less of that. But the truth behind it is, sometimes we don't know. There are situations that you could be in, but you don't think that you've been in that situation for so long that you don't think that's the cause. Or, as I say, it's hard for me to come up with examples because it took me years to understand my own anxieties and things like that, and I still get it. I mean, that's what I mean when it's kind of hard. Like you talk to people and they say, "Oh, I'm feeling more anxious than I used to nowadays," and you kind of think, "I don't know what to say to this person right now," because the first thing in my mind is to say, okay, you've got to get on top of that. But you've got to almost say to yourself, well, I need to ask this person why they're feeling that way. It's a whole thing. It's a sit down, let's talk about it thing. It's not like we're having a 5-minute conversation and I say to you, oh, well, hopefully it won't get too bad. Because that's not going to help. That's not going to help. It's not going to help. It's not like you got a headache and and the person says, go take some painkillers. Okay. And hopefully it'll go away. But if someone says to you, I'm feeling more anxious and I don't know why, not everybody can answer that question. They can't say, oh, well, it's pretty obvious. Or if someone says, I think I'm anxious because I've got, I've got this big test coming up, or it's always something deeper. Because obviously the person wouldn't be asking you that question or saying that to you if they already knew what it was. And depression as well. Depression is another one which, depression and anxiety, they're like together. They come together. They are. You can't, in a sense, you can't have one without the other. And if you have one, it could lead to the other, So you're anxious all the time, which people could say essentially means you care too much about everything. Like, you care what people think, care what people say, you care what happens in your life, or, and then eventually you just like, you come to like a sort of pinnacle where you're just like, I don't care anymore. And then you get depressed. Or you're depressed and then you start to come out of it. But then you start to feel anxious, and then it drags you back down into the depression, and it just goes on and on. But with anxiety and with depression, it has like, I don't know what you call it, offsprings of like, well, if you have an eating disorder, for instance, you might be anxious with food. You might be anxious to go to a meal with your family or with friends. Um, with depression, it's like little things you could be fine during the day, and then one little thing could completely drag you down, because you're kind of like your depression starts like here, and you're just here, and if one little thing comes along, it just drags you straight down. I think medication is very helpful, but I think talking about why these things are happening with somebody, whether it be therapy or a psychologist or a psychiatrist or somebody who is a professional in whatever you're dealing with, like if you do have body image, eating disorder, PTSD, whoever you can talk to about that, to get those feelings and those thoughts out there, so you can understand it, so you can unpack those things, to look at them and say, okay, this is where maybe it began, and this is why this might be happening. How do I deal with it? It doesn't mean it will cure you. It just means you'll know how to manage it better. I suppose that's another thing which is like a hard truth, is that depression never really goes away. Maybe mental health problems never generally go away. They just kind of stay with you. You just find better ways of dealing with them, which is not a bad thing. If I would not say to anyone, I would hate to say to someone, oh, well, you've been depressed once, that's it for the rest of your life now, you have to deal with this. Because that sounds very defeatist, and it sounds too depressing, it's like, oh, great, so this is it. And it's like, yeah, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. You can go years without it. It depends on how strong it is. And then you got people who like, another thing I want to quickly mention is like personality disorders, and then you've got things like bipolar disorder, you've got BPD, which is borderline personality disorder, you've got things like avoidant personality disorder, you've got schizophrenia. There's a lot of other mental health issues out there, and some of these are just conditions of the brain which medication can help with, but these are lifelong term conditions which are very difficult to deal with. A lot of mental health issues as well can be debilitating, can be like a disability, because people with that deep, dark depression could not be able to get out of bed, let alone get out of their house. And the same with any mental health issue. It just depends on if that person is not getting the right help, or they've spent too long in that hole. The longer you spend in that grip of whatever it is that's dragging you down, it's it's like chipping away at you, and to the point where there'll be nothing left, and then someone has to come along and help you slowly and rebuild you. And sometimes you can't, because our experiences that we have in life can really, really like make or break you as a person, and no one is like invulnerable to that sort of scenario. It's weird how, like, depending on when you were born and when you grew up and what your values are, all these things shape the way you view the world and how you view yourself. And if you're someone who really like thrives to do everything all the time, and then they wonder why they're drained all the time, and then they get upset because they think they're not good enough anymore because they can't do what they used to do, and it's like someone needs to come along and say, hey, it's okay. some people like to say, like, people who don't have a great understanding of mental health say things like, oh, well, it could be worse. You know, your life could be this, you could be starving, you could be homeless. And while those things are true, what about the people who are homeless? What about people who are suffering? So it's like, oh, well, they're okay to be depressed. But that's not how it works. Comparing your life to someone else to make your life look better can in turn make it feel worse, because then you're like, well, I don't appreciate what I have then. And I'm a really bad person. And again, that doesn't help. But so, I mean, on the flip side, you can appreciate the stuff you have. You know, you can say, well, I've got a home, or I've got friends, or I've got nice food to eat, or I've got clothes. You know, you can really put it down to the most basic things to say, I appreciate this, I appreciate that. But say there are different ways of dealing with mental health, and one thing I've definitely learned is that, like, I'll be 39 this year. I feel, I think because of my autism, I have a bit of a young brain. Like, I'm still into like silly things and messing around with toys and video games and stuff like that. But then again, you can say anybody, someone without autism could be into that sort of stuff. But I guess what I'm saying is, someone could say, well, you're only 38 right now. And it's like, yeah, but my goodness, does my life feel like it's been long. I don't feel old, but I feel like my life has been long. And that's because there's been periods of it where it's just been awful. Um, Especially in comparison to right now, where it's kind of really good. And then you look back on certain scenarios in your life, you think, how did I get through that? And that's another thing, is like, you sometimes the bad times are there to kind of teach you, like, well, not teach you, sorry, you could look back on that time and go, if I can get through this, I can use this as something to say, well, it was, you know, I was in a worse situation. And yeah, I've been in those situations, but also it's kind of sad, because you kind of look back on your younger self and you go, if I could go back in time and just say to that person, you know, you've got to get out of this situation somehow. Um, I try not to think about it too much, but I have been recently just to sort of like say, wow, I can't believe I I was in that situation, and it kind of makes me a bit sad, because it's like, um, it just does. It's all personal, you know. It's like, why does that make you sad? Well, because my life could have been, I could have been so much happier, but I wasn't. But then also, there are times where I'm like, I wish I would have done something there and then. But the flip side of that is, sometimes you don't know. You don't have the tools. You didn't know how to deal with that situation. You know how to deal with it now, but you know, back then you didn't know how. So that's why you were stuck and you were like in that situation in the first place. Anybody could look back in hindsight and go, well, if I just did this, and it's like, yeah, but you didn't, and you didn't have that answer right there and then. But anyway, this is just a short vid about how I'm going to start trying to do some videos on mental health and discuss a lot of the stuff I've taught in this video with a bit more depth. I used to be a very private person, but one thing I realized is, while that is a good thing sometimes, in the end, you end up quite alone with your issues. I think being more open is a good thing. Now you might say, yeah, but I don't want people to know my stuff, and people will say this about me. Let me tell you right now, what's helping me, like what has got me in such a better place, is this. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks about you. You are you, and if you're held back by other people's opinions, that's a bad thing. And you've got to change that attitude, because at the end of the day, you only get one life. And if you're afraid to be yourself because of other people and what other people might think about you, and especially if you're not... See, this is one thing I would say. If what you're doing and what you enjoy doing doesn't hurt anyone, just do it. Be yourself. If someone criticizes you for being yourself and it's not hurting anyone, who cares? Who cares what they think? You know what I mean? You've got to really embrace who you are and say, I don't care what you think, because if I do, then I won't do what I want to do, and I won't be myself, and then I'll be unhappy. And that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to live your life based upon other people's opinions. You have to be yourself. And when you start to be yourself, and this isn't like some people say, oh, I say what I want, I do what I want, I don't care about anyone. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about being free of, oh, but this person might think that, or this person might think this. Don't see people as your enemy. That's what a lot of people do, make that mistake. They go, oh, well, this person would say that, so screw them, and blah, 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 and I'm going to just like rub it in the face. Like, no, don't. That's not the way to do it. You need to just do what you want to do. You know, you want to wear weird clothes, you want to say crazy things, and you want to be funny, you want to go watch, I can't think of great examples right now, but whatever you're like, hey, I should probably do this thing, especially nowadays, this year 2021, there are so many things that have changed in the last, I would say 10 years. Like, I'm watching some old TV programs on, like, some of the streaming channels, and some of them are like, these jokes don't work anymore because they're out of date, and they're quite insulting to, like, the way the world is now. It doesn't bother me because I'm 38. I've been alive for 38 years. These jokes or whatever, but it's just interesting how people are more expressive and open to who they are. And there's always been people like that in life forever, but they've been held back by, like, oh, this person might think this, oh, this person might think that, this person will say this person will make fun of me. When someone makes fun of you and you get insulted, you don't have to be insulted. You just be like, I don't care. I don't care what you think. Why would I care what you think? I wish I'd have learned this lesson a long time ago. But that's the thing that I think maybe parents should teach their kids more so when they're younger. Because when you're going through, like, high school and stuff, oh geez, I'm really going off on a tangent here. That's when that stuff really hits you as a teenager. You're like, what? Like, you're different. And although that stuff follows you throughout life, when you're in school and you're a bunch, kids can be really mean. And although we're still kind of mean as adults, in, like, the working world, we're kind of like, we're mean, but we're a bit more adult about it. And, like, we're not so childish about it. Well, some of us are. But what I'm saying is, you've got to brush that stuff off. Now, I can say that. And you could be going through a really bad time right now. You could be being bullied or whatever. And say, well, it's not that easy. And you know what? You're right. It's not. I can say that now. But I'm 38 years old. So I've been through a lot of it. And I mean a lot. But I'll tell you one quick thing right now. Is when that stuff gets to you really badly. And you start to turn that anger in. And you start to hurt yourself. Hate yourself. And then things get a bit dark. And you might not be around. Do you know what I'm saying? That's when you've got to go, oh my God, actually, if this is what me caring about what other people think leads to, I got to get rid of all that. Because I want to live, and I want to live my life happily. At the end of the day, you're not going to please everyone. And you shouldn't have to. People should take you for who you are. And that's a quick way to find out who your real friends are. You be yourself. And if they want to be around you, want to talk to you, get to know you, then great. If they don't, well, forget them. Move on. But you'll be at your happiest when you're you. It's not to say we're all perfect, because we're not. There'll be things about you which you're like, I suppose I should, maybe quiet that bit down or do this and the other. But at the end of the day, I suppose you could say we're growing. And that's another video I would like to do about growth and how we're always growing. But I'm going to cut the video now because it's nearly gone 30 minutes. But yeah, so I'm going to start doing more videos, new videos, a different perspective than I did a few years ago. And hopefully I'll learn something about myself too. Anyway, thank you for watching if you have, and I'll see you soon.